A quiet energy crisis is turning into a geopolitical test, stretching from Washington to Mexico City and all the way to Havana. Behind closed doors, Mexico is scrambling to find a way to send fuel to Cuba without triggering punishing tariffs from the United States. Reuters sources say senior Mexican officials are locked in near-daily talks with Washington, trying to decode the scope of President Donald Trump's warning. Countries that supply oil to Cuba could face U.S. tariffs. For Mexico, the stakes are high. Cuba depends on imports for nearly two-thirds of its energy needs. Power outages are worsening, gas lines are growing longer, and after U.S. action against Venezuelan oil shipments earlier this year, Mexico has emerged as Havana's largest remaining fuel lifeline. But that lifeline is under pressure.
Inside the young, I can't even see the walls. I'm always bumping into things. I'll bump into the wall, or I'll catch a cold or hit the main door because I can't see. And the neighbor gave me that little lamp with petroleum so I could light up what's there.
Well, the sense of mortality, because we were born right here, we have seen so many things, both good and bad, but we hold on to the deity of a free Cuba, and it must die with us.
A good institution, because money, especially the money, used to be worth something to us. But now that this system has changed, this system of dollars and all that, money isn't enough to buy food, and we are really struggling.
There is so much work to do.
Up until December, things were a little bit better, but now January. In January, we're really feeling the pressure like this. Look, so much pressure. The anvil is truly hammering us down. So then, where exactly do we see any improvement?
We don't concern ourselves with power outages. We don't care about politics. We don't care about anything at all. You know what? That's just the way we are. We are a happy family, a truly content family. As my son always says, if we need to go over there, we'll go over there. If we need to come over here, we'll come over here.
In mid-January, Mexico quietly halted shipments of crude and refined fuel amid mounting signals from the Trump administration. Washington has since branded Cuba an extraordinary threat to U.S. national security, a claim Havana flatly denies. Now, Mexico is caught between two forces: the threat of economic retaliation from its largest trading partner and the risk of a humanitarian collapse just across the Caribbean. One source put it bluntly: Mexico does not want tariffs, but it is firm in its policy of helping the Cuban people. The alarm is growing louder. The United Nations has warned that without fuel, Cuba could face a humanitarian breakdown, hitting hospitals, food distribution, and basic services. And as pressure builds abroad, Mexico's president is striking a defiant tone at home. Speaking at a constitutional anniversary ceremony, President Claudia Sheinbaum vowed that Mexico would not bow to foreign interference. Mexico does not kneel, does not surrender, and is not for sale, she declared, invoking the country's long struggle to defend its sovereignty and natural resources. Her words come as she faces pressure from within her own political coalition, which has deep historical and ideological ties to Cuba, not to abandon Havana in its moment of need.
The people of Mexico will not, under any circumstances, accept or tolerate interventions, intrusions, or any form of meddling from foreign entities, or any other act from abroad that could prove to be detrimental. Integrity, independence, and sovereignty, such as coup d'etat, interference in elections, or the violation of Mexican territory, whether this occurs by land, water, sea, or airspace.
Mexico will not, under any circumstances, revert to being a colony or a protectorate of any nation. Senator Lauritzel Castillo, the president of the board, Mexico will never surrender its natural resources.
We declare with all our might, Mexico will not be made to bend. It will not kneel before anyone. It will never surrender its spirit, and it will certainly not be sold out.
The Constitution of 1917, long live the people of Mexico, long live.
At the same time, Washington is issuing its own warnings. The White House says Cuba is on its last leg and urged Havana to be wise in its statements toward the U.S. president, even as it insists diplomacy remains possible.
Cuban leader Miguel
Miguel Diaz-Canel said today that Cuba would be willing to engage in dialogue with the United States only without pressure, without preconditions, on equal footing and with respect for sovereignty. But his government is denying what President Trump said, that they're already holding talks. How would you respond to that?
I think the fact that the Cuban government is on its last leg and its country is about to collapse, they should be wise in their statements directed towards the President of the United States. But as I just reiterated, the President is always willing to engage in diplomacy, and I believe that's something that is taking place, in fact, with the Cuban government.
Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel says his country is open to dialogue, but only without pressure. He accuses the United States of turning tariffs into an energy blockade, denying Cuba fuel while pushing the island deeper into a crisis.
Cuba is willing to engage in a dialogue with the United States, a dialogue on any of the topics that one wishes to debate or discuss. On what condition then? Without any pressure, because under pressure, you simply can't have a dialogue. Without any preconditioning, in a position of equality, in a position of deep respect for our national sovereignty, our cherished independence, and our right to self-determination, to overcome illiteracy, and they declare these territories to be completely free of illiteracy. We Cuban men and women do not hate the American people. We acknowledge the values of the American people, the values of their history, the values of their culture. When we have had the opportunity for there to be meeting spaces between our peoples in various sectors, in the scientific sector, in the sports sector, in the religious sector, in the cultural sector, in the health sector, even at the level of political dialogue, we have discovered that there are many things on which we can effectively collaborate. From an entire group since the 1st of February, the United States government manipulating through the threat of tariffs against the countries that supply oil is practically, with that very pretext, what has transformed it into an energy blockade against our nation. You might say to me, but well, that's a social achievement that everyone aspires to. Yes, but that still hasn't been achieved globally. We just had a meeting of the Council of Ministers as well to update a plan. Specifically, what we were looking at in the Council of Ministers was the government directive to address a severe fuel shortage. The member states of the Group of Friends of Defense are aware that today there were telephone conversations held between the President and General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping, and the President of the Russian Federation, Putin, and during these discussions, support was also expressed and in the commitment and the decision to continue the collaboration in cooperation with Venezuela and with Cuba. Let's remember that Venezuela has been subjected to sanctions. It has been under coercive measures and significant pressures. This has also affected the level of exchange, which has been maintained to a very significant degree, but it has not always managed to reach the levels experienced in previous times. The world cannot allow itself to be trampled upon. The world cannot permit itself to be humiliated. The world cannot allow force to simply crush multilateralism. Well, and I think about issues like this, and I believe the first thing is that we must understand, countries have to understand, the people have to understand what is happening. They have to understand that we are all facing throughout the world, without exception, a war that is... We are not a threat to the United States. Now, those who are constantly speaking of aggressions, above all, have raised the insulting rhetoric about a possible aggression against Cuba has been the United States government at this moment. One of the priorities we established was to deploy a defense preparedness plan in the interest of an all-people's war, which include the preparation of our country's entire territorial defense system.
As Cuba prepares emergency plans for acute fuel shortages, Mexico weighs whether humanitarian aid, fuel, food, and supplies can move without crossing Washington's red lines. This is no longer just about oil. It is about sovereignty, pressure, and power. and whether diplomacy can still function when energy becomes a weapon. In the shadow of tariffs and shortages, the question remains, will compromise come first or collapse?